One of the ongoing challenges pertaining to English language learners is figuring out ways to assess them properly. Before we can assess ELLs, we must reflect upon the purpose for doing so. There are three important points to look for when assessing ELLs. 1. Identification and program placement of students in need of special language support services. 2. Program evaluation for reporting to local, state, and federal education agencies. And 3. Documentation of student learning and progress to A. Inform instructional decisions, or B. Communicate progress to parents. It is a teacher's responsibility to document the student's learning and progress. It is unfortunate that many teachers fail to do so and do not make any contact with the parents at all besides open house night. There are two types of assessments: formal assessments and informal assessments. Formal assessments are group-administered standardized achievement tests that focus on subjects such as reading, writing, or mathematics, and are also known as standardized tests. They can also be used individually to identify special learning needs. Informal assessments include those made by teachers, such as analysis of oral reading, regular spelling checks, or notes on observations. Both types of tests are designed for different measures, but which one is more reliable when it comes to assessing ELLs? Opinions vary all throughout school districts, but before we select one that we feel is correct for our classrooms, we should look them over in more detail. First off, formal assessments are generally designed to compare individuals or groups to a previously established norm. In my opinion, as well as many others, you would be wronging your ELL students if you were to test them through this type of assessment. This is because the usual population of norm reference tests usually consists primarily of fluent English speakers. It can be unfair and misleading to compare ELLs to fluent English speakers. The proficiency tests that are taken in high school are criterion reference tests. These kinds of tests set up cutoff scores that determine whether the student has met the standard. When evaluating an ELL's performance on these kinds of tests, teachers must consider if the criterion is reasonable for their students or not. On the other hand, we have informal assessments. What makes these different from formal assessments is that you are comparing the students with themselves or with a small group in your class. These tests take more time and effort since the teacher must be fully committed when it comes to analyzing the students on a day-to-day basis and recording their progress throughout various assignments. I believe that this is a much more reliable way to assess students in general, especially ELLs, for many reasons. First of all, not all students are good test takers. This is not because they do not know the material, but because they simply do not react the way that they are expected to on a test, and they struggle to recall information during formal tests. They may feel frustrated by staring at a packet with questions and multiple answers from which to choose from. Now, after taking this into account, can you imagine how an ELL student feels? The level of anxiety can more than double if you struggle with the language and taking tests. Sure, it is important to prepare students for these kinds of tests, but we should not rely on them so much. This is a major part of what causes anxiety in students. Even though informal tests are harder to assess, they can be designed to shape the student's individual needs, especially those of an ELL. According to a study in the school year 2007-2008 by the University of Phoenix on the use of formal and informal assessments of English language learners in a language experience class, they concluded that the results from using informal assessments were much more consistent and reliable than those from formal assessments. They also concluded that informal assessments promote engagement in learning activities and are far more adaptable to the student's special needs. So far, we are still struggling to find the best way to assess ELLs and other students, but I believe that we are slowly improving. It all really depends on the teachers. We have to take the time to get to know our students and design techniques for their individual needs. This is why I think informal assessments, if used correctly, are a great way to analyze your students and determine those critical areas in which they are striving or struggling in. Keep in mind not only your ELL students, but those who have special needs as well, because after all, whether we speak English or not, we are all different, and the norm, which we compare ourselves to, can be very misleading.